Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Demystifying AI, Practical Ways to Get Started with AI in Data Analytics. I'm Chris Atterbury with Data Intelligence. Just a few things before we get started. This session will be recorded, and a link to the recording will be available upon request. The slide presentation will also be available upon request. I will be monitoring the chat and Q&A, so feel free to drop in a question or comment at any time, and I will relay to the presenters. If we do not have time to get to all questions, we will follow up with you to make sure that you get an answer. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve Whitekin, who is the Chief Product Officer at Data Intelligence. Steve?
Okay, thanks everyone for joining us today. We have a great panel here to talk about about AI, and the title of today's talk is Demystifying AI, Practical Ways to Get Started with AI and Data Analytics. Joining me today, my name's Steve Whitekin. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Data Intelligence. Joining me today is Larry Blackburn, who's the Chief Executive Officer at Data Intelligence, along with Scott Sorensen from UAB and Jody Schaefer from Cornell College. Scott and Jody will introduce themselves a little bit more in a second here. Today's agenda, what we're going to talk about today is we'll start off by talking about the current state of AI in higher education and get into some key requirements and obstacles for AI success. Jody will talk about her experience at Cornell College around this topic. We'll then have Scott talk about an AI pilot he did at UAB and lessons learned. And we'll go through some use cases we see as a company at Data Intelligence for using AI within higher ed. And then we'll finish with giving you some quick steps, 5 steps you can take to get started with AI at your institution. So let me first start by talking about the current state of AI in higher education. Data Intelligence runs a quarterly user group on higher analytics or analytics within higher ed. And we surveyed all our members, and we got some interesting results on where they're at with data and using AI. One of the things we found that the top 3 barriers for data analytics maturity within their institution include staffing resources, meaning they don't have enough staff to devote to building out their analytics. Data integration, you probably have heard the term, our data is siloed, right? That their data is in a bunch of different places. It's not in one platform where they can take advantage of it being together so they can do more comprehensive analytics. And finally, financial resources. We know that a lot of schools are facing pressures recently. You've heard the term, the demographic cliff, enrollments are going down. So all schools are feeling a little bit of a pressure around finances. But to AI is, again, everyone's aware of it. Starting about a year ago when ChatGPT became, more prominent, these large language model, et cetera. So everyone's interested in using AI, but from our respondents, almost 90% of them feel that their institution is at a novice or below status as far as using AI. And then we asked them, what are their top plans for next year to address these barriers? Top 1 is really around data integration. Everyone's saying we got to get our data out of those silos, bring it together into one platform so we can do more stuff with that these data. Also, they need more staffing. They need people with expertise to help build that data integration, build those data platforms. But also, too, as they look towards AI, we need people with the skill set really to understand AI and use it effectively. And finally, new technologies for efficiency, right? What other technologies do they need that are cost effective that they can implement and get value out of? So here, this is just showing some of the respondents. I mentioned already that 89% rated themselves as novice or below in the implementation of AI tools. I think kind of go in parallel with that, a little bit over 60% of the institutions do not have an AI policy currently, okay? And I think these two kind of go hand in hand. You really got to get your institution ready to use AI before you jump in. And that starts with having some good policies around using it. And finally, this is what this shows you graphically what I talked about. What are the barriers to improving their analytics? And you can see those top three there: staffing levels, data is not organized or integrated, and they don't have the financial resources to do it. And this is a common comment here, doing the best with what we have. All schools have, day-to-day pressures to keep the operations going. They may not have time to focus on improving their analytics. So let me first introduce Jody Schaefer, and she comes from Cornell College. Jody, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I'm Jody Schaefer, and I manage our career office on campus. I am located in Mount Vernon, as you can see, Iowa. It's a small town in kind of the middle of Iowa, and work for Cornell College, a private four-year institution, traditional liberal arts. We have about 1,200 students, and we are known for one course at a time. So that's where students take 3.5 weeks of class, one class, and they have a 2-day break, and then they move into another class. So that offers a lot of opportunity for off-campus study and for internships, and really diving into the courses that they're taking to develop kind of their skills as it relates to jumping in and problem solving and creativity. And so we are no different than what Steve just described. I would say we are definitely in that stage where we're very much thinking about AI, but we do not have a strategy as of yet. We are developing a task force as we speak and doing some training at the moment. We just did some training. And so we're discovering right now and learning a lot, but we have yet to develop a strategy.
Great. Thanks, Jody. And we'll go in a little deeper at what Jody's doing at Cornell here. Let me also introduce Scott Sorensen from UAB. Scott, you want to give an overview of UAB and what you're doing there?
Yes, thanks, Steve. So Scott Sorensen, I'm Executive Director of Data Privacy and Analytics at UAB. I work in Central IT. UAB is part of the Alabama system, which includes Tuscaloosa and Huntsville. We're a large academic medical center. We're one of the largest ones in the country. We have, as you can see on the screen, so besides the 20-some thousand students we have, we also have a lot of research grants and awards, contracts. So that, our goal is actually to go to $1 billion worth. And so that adds a lot of complexities regarding data, regarding processes, regarding systems on campus. And because we're an academic medical center, we also have a lot of employees, 26,000 employees as well. Just a brief comment about that survey, Steve, is I would say, yeah, we're in the same position. I would say to some degree, certainly we've got some experience, but we also, and I'll throw out the URL for everyone. If you go to uab.edu/AI, we have a public page there. It's got several pages associated with it where we have guidelines for the faculty and staff about AI. We don't have a policy because we've taken the guidelines and matched them up to our current policies, and we said they're a match. We don't need one per se. But before you can start using AI, you have to go through an approval process. Also on that page, you'll see which tools have been approved for AI and which tools haven't been approved for AI or pending.
Wow, that's okay. Interesting. Thank you, Scott. Okay, let's move into this next section where we're going to talk about key requirements and obstacles for AI success. And what we'll do is we'll have Jody kind of talk about her experience at Cornell, a brief overview of the data and analytics at Cornell is that they have their data managed on premise using or visualization using Tableau server. So Tableau is a visualization tool for analytics. They are using Snowflake as their cloud data platform. They started in 2021. And they're using it as to integrate their data, right? We talked about data silos being an issue. Cornell is somewhat ahead of the game. This, again, starting in 2021. They have all their major systems feeding Snowflake as their unified data platform. using that, they're able to accelerate their development of analytics from solutions in Tableau, including one for student retention, looking at major movement, how students' pathways through the institution as far as changing majors, withdrawals, and a solution around ingenuity in action, which is actually a program that Jody runs. So they're getting their use out of analytics, Tableau, and Snowflake. Let me turn it over to Jody. Jody, I know you gave a brief overview of what you do at Cornell, but why don't you go a little more detail around the Berry Center,
Right.
Career Institute, excuse me.
Sure. Yeah. So the Berry Career Institute came to be about 8 years ago, and we always had kind of career coaches, but they were at different parts of the institution. And so we came together and we really manage kind of the majority of the professional development activities, as well as just preparing students to be ready to go out into the work world. And so that comes in the form of what you would expect: career coaching, resume reviews, helping them navigate their network and how do they network, helping them then once they're in the interview process and negotiating an offer. But we also run a couple of unique programs. We run a pre-law program that encompasses a mock trial program that has some success at the national level. We also have a pre-health program called Dimensions for Health Professions. We run a career course, so a life design course through our office, as well as a leadership development course. But really, as it relates to career, we try to embed some of the concepts that we talk to students about into the curriculum so that every student at Cornell is able to receive that kind of instruction. And I would anticipate, I will be kind of leading the task force for AI at our institution, because it does have such a, it's so important to students to kind of understand AI and what they're walking into with the future of work. So that's how my office sort of integrates with the initiatives for AI.
Great. So you can see some of the prompts here, but this is meant to be a discussion. So do you want to start by talking about your AI journey so far? You sort of touched upon it, but give a little more detail around that.
Sure. So really we've known that AI is, right, we're on the cusp of it. We're in it right now, basically. And we know that, there needs to be an effort behind it. So as of right now, we have spoken to leadership about making kind of an AI strategy and a policy and just kind of delving into it a priority for the college. So this is one of 3 priorities that we will be tackling from an operational standpoint in the coming year, in the coming couple of years. We have some architectural challenges as we think about AI. So we are both a Microsoft and a Google campus. So we really have to sort of figure that out before we can even delve into what sort of tool we want to use or tools that we want to use. So we're sort of, bringing people together, talking a lot to IT to understand the capabilities there. They are using AI probably more so than others across the college. Everybody right now is pretty much using AI on an individual basis. And so we're trying to get a handle on what that looks like, but also educate at the same time. And make sure that we're not putting a lot of data into AI tools that the college hasn't vetted or looked at, and making sure everybody understands kind of the ramifications of the use of data with AI.
Yeah. So Jody, you kind of hinted at part of the reason you're going down this path is, one, to understand it, and also kind of prepare the staff so they understand it, so they can better prepare the students, right? Because this is the future, right? They got to at least understand it. Are there other goals, other reasons that you're looking into AI? What do you hope to get out of it?
Well, we hope to get the same thing that I think every organization, business, institution hopes to get out of it, which is organizational efficiency. There's really, that's one of the things that we have to get right now with the competitive market that is higher ed, especially for small private liberal arts institutions. And if we get that right, then the financial situation looks a lot better. And even for kind of the cultural side of things, I think if humans are freed up from administrative burden to do kind of more exciting and interesting work, that's going to make Cornell a better place to be. And I think we'll give those who really implement an AI strategy, I think we'll have a unique competitive advantage in the future. So that's a longer term goal, I would say. But that's on the operational side. But then also there's this whole academic side of things, and how do you utilize AI with students? And we certainly don't have the answers to that, but that is a little bit more tricky, I would say, than even the operational side. I think people see the benefits, kind of the immediate benefits operationally, but when it comes to how you utilize it with students and how open you make it to students, even though we know they're going to use it regardless because they can, there's a lot of concern about kind of the ethics of AI in academia.
Yeah. Are you aware, does Cornell have a set policy? Like, can students use it, not use it?
There is no set policy. It is based on individual faculty preferences at this point, but that is where we would like to get to.
Gotcha. Just a couple, you kind of hit most of these things, but just as you started down there, because my understanding is you've been tasked to kind of lead this a little bit of this journey, right, for Cornell. What have been some of your biggest challenges you faced?
Well, as of right now, I mean, I think we're on the cusp of understanding what those challenges will be, but we definitely have some staffing challenges. Everybody's working really, really hard with limited time. And so, not unlike what you showed in your survey, we absolutely have that challenge. We also have the challenge of potentially, how many financial resources we can put towards this, because as I mentioned, we have kind of 3 priorities at an operational level. And so, depending on how those other 2 kind of pan out, we'll have to really look at the finances and what can go towards AI. So those are the big challenges. However, I will say that, I think the institution is ready to embark on this, both at a kind of a high executive level as well as at a departmental level. So, that's a real positive.
Gotcha. And just to finish this up, from your perspective, what do you see as some of the key requirements to be successful? Kind of what are your non-negotiables, right, around this?
Yeah, I think we have to get proper buy-in. That'll be the biggest thing, is just are people really bought into this and moving in the same direction? I don't think you can guarantee that everybody's going to be bought into it, and we're not expecting that, but we hope that the majority will. I think we have to make sure that the data structures are in place. Even IT resources, at least initially, to help out with some of that, light programming that might be needed. And we have to figure out kind of our architecture. We also, we need to kind of label our data so everybody understands it and how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't done that thus far. And then proper training is going to be huge, and that will take some time.
Gotcha. Great. No, thank you, Jody, for giving that overview there.
Sure.
Scott, I know we're going to turn it over to you, but I just had one question for you, Scott, and I know Larry's going to take it from there. But does UAB have, as far as a policy around students using AI for coursework?
As far as I know, they don't. I think it is, as Jody mentioned, to each faculty member. I know UAB, and I think on that URL that I gave you earlier, uab.edu/AI, there would be links. They have training for out of our Center of Teaching and Learning for faculty members to how to utilize, if they're interested in utilizing AI, how to utilize it. So this summer, UAB has been very proactive with the faculty of trying to bring them up to speed to, I believe, give them either the tools to use AI or at least help them make the decision about if they want to use AI.
That's great. All right. Now let me turn it over to Larry. Larry, you're going to lead the discussion with Scott here. So.
Yeah, great segue actually into the next section. And we're going to bring in, and I thought Jody's discussion was great around sort of looking at the operational and academic side of AI. But as she mentioned, right, there's things that we need from the IT side. So we're going to dive into that a little bit more on the IT technical side and have Scott talk about their POC they did at UAB and lessons learned from that. So Scott, I think you can take it from here and talk about your environment at UAB.
Okay. So from a data and analytics perspective, we have an on-premise Tableau server and a Power BI report server. We are testing out the Power BI Pro service in the cloud. That's something we would definitely want to look at. There's the Tableau server is used quite heavily by 20 to 30 departments. And other than that, we don't have, so that's for our reporting tools or BI tools. We don't have a data lake, data warehouse of a large nature, right? We have a student operational data store. So we have all the silos and all the struggles that many of the others have. And our analytical resources are distributed throughout the department. So back to even the survey, right? Staffing's a challenge, even, you know, for us in IT. We struggle to have the right amount of resources to continue to move forward with data and analytics. So what we did last summer as part of the when AI became big, so this is in the summer of 2023, and of course ChatGPT and OpenAI and end of 2022, beginning of 2023 came out and made public their tool. What we did was, and that generated a lot of interest, we invited 4 vendors to come on site to do demos for academics, research, administration, and medicine. And you can see Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and Salesforce. Salesforce, we do have the marketing cloud. Then, of course, Tableau is owned by Salesforce. We were selected by Salesforce to pilot Tableau's AI called Tableau Pulse in August of 2023. And we are happy to do that. Now, the time frame was, I would say, compressed. So back to maybe even lessons learned or getting towards that is we were working on Tableau's schedule, not necessarily our schedule. And I understand why. They hadn't gone with their general release yet. They were going to do that in January of 2024. So they wanted to have a pilot done by all their participants of participating in their pilots in the fall there in November and December. So it took us, but I will say it took us some hurdles with like legal language, understanding the trust, you know, what are they doing with our data and all that, which I think we all have to go through each of that with every one of our vendors. So I would say, you know, as we start to look at these vendors and, you know, again, lessons learned is give yourself some time to understand how that data is being used. Is it going to be used to train models in the future? What is the vendor going to do with the data in the future in relation to AI? And then we got through that and we were able to start the pilot in early November.
Great. Thanks for that overview, Scott. So I'm going to ask some questions to help talk more about your pilot and what you have learned from that. So first question, if you could identify top 3 lessons from the POC, what would they be? And also talk about how you're continuing to use Tableau Pulse.
Okay. And I kind of debate about giving general lessons versus just lessons around Tableau, because if just looking at it, you know, to purchase a Tableau cloud instance, you can purchase a small number of licenses and start that up pretty quickly at a relatively low cost. And so I think that's a lesson learned that we had. So we did the pilot, and we have to answer that second question is we did purchase a small Tableau cloud instance, and you purchase by licenses. So maybe we have 10 creators and 20 viewers again. So it's not a large instance in relation to the rest of our to like our Tableau server. On our Tableau server, we have 2,000 users and 100 creators. So it's easy. And so I would say for some of these tools, it's easy to do a test. Also with the POC, Tableau really focused on, they use the term pulse, but it's about metrics, right? So rather than, if everybody's familiar, whether it's Power BI or Tableau or any of the other BI tools, you develop dashboards. And what they're focused more on is data changing and looking at the metrics to develop those insights for business leaders. So it was interesting, and I think, at least in my mind, in my eyes, of seeing, oh, we need to be focused more on, depending on what type of data you're looking at and who is the person consuming that data, we may be able to do away or go with less dashboards and more metrics and insights coming out of these tools. The software changes quickly is another lesson learned. And Tableau has definitely made changes from the time we did our POC. And that's true with any of these tools, right? We look at a tool today and 6 months from now, there's going to be a lot of changes. I don't know if that was 3, but I would say that's our lessons learned. And we did continue with Tableau Pulse.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I know there's lots of lessons. I think you gave a whole talk on that. So I think that's great to hear your key points on that. You mentioned AI governance before. You probably had some kind of process for governance over the data before. So talk a little bit about what you had maybe before and after, and anything that maybe changed as a result of the POC.
Well, I would say probably not as a result of the POC as much as, but we continue to see, whether it's with Tableau or other tools that we are piloting on campus, that you've got to have good data. It's the same old, adage of garbage in, garbage out. So if we don't feed good data into the system, it's not going to generate good answers coming out. And I would say that's the biggest key. Now, I do think that has raised the awareness with users on campus. So again, back to our silos, back to we have data governance, but it's really limited, or I would say immature, and we definitely have a ways to mature. So I think there's an awareness from everybody on campus of how we need to increase our data governance moving forward.
Great. And then related to that, AI policies, sounds like we asked a question about policies around students' use of AI, but talk about where you are with AI policies, and then maybe anything that you might have gotten from the POC as far as policies that are needed to continue.
Yes. So yeah, there's not, as far as I know, a policy for students, and there's not a policy per se for employees, but there's guidelines. But what the university did was map each of those guidelines back to pre-existing policies. So if it's in relation to confidentiality of data, that's a policy. Well, that fits in with AI, right? We don't, unless that system's been vetted by us, by IT and our security folks, we are not going to put confidential data in there. And we use Microsoft Copilot and MSN, or in the Edge browser. So that's okay for us to ask questions in there, because that's been vetted, and that would say go to the confidentiality policy that we do have. So that's the tack that UAB took, is not to develop new policies. And I think the way we're seeing it work out in the future, that AI eventually becomes just another feature as part of these tools. Now, it's a very important feature now, but should we develop new policies around it, or should our current policies just handle what's going on with AI now? And I think so far it's been good. And I'll say that, but then I'll add, we do have a committee that looks at use of AI to make sure that the people using the AI are following the guidelines and following the current policies.
Yeah, like you said, I think this is sort of a process to look at leverage existing first before you go off and create new, right? So, but it maybe puts more emphasis on the policies than before. So the final question is, you think about, if somebody were to ask you, hey, Scott, I want to do something similar, what would you recommend to them to think about first?
I would go back to that one question you had about data, right? Is your data good enough to do it, to do the pilot. And even maybe if it's not good enough, be careful about who you share the data with, right? You don't want to start telling some stories or having some results out there where you have to explain, oh, well, if, ands, and buts. So make sure it's a controlled pilot and you understand what data you're using to put into the pilot. And also technology wise, I would also make sure you understand what data you're connecting to. And I'll just throw out there the Tableau cloud. Currently we've tried to connect to a SSAS SQL analytical server, and Tableau cloud doesn't want to connect to that, right? And that's not how Tableau works. I get it, but that, that means we've got to come up with a different tactic. So I would say a lot of planning, take it slow, and think it through. And of course, it's always hard to take it slow because everybody nowadays is saying AI, we want answers. Let's get going. And as Jody was saying, right, we want that efficiency to come, but I do think you need to take some time with it.
Yeah, that's great, Scott. And then one question I didn't have on here and kind of relates to Jody mentioned earlier, right, about needing to look at architecture. So since you're on the IT side, are you missing anything on the architecture side?
A data architect would be one thing we're missing. So back to the the silos and all. And one thing that we are doing, and again, larger institution, and we had, in fact, just this week, we've looked at our internal IT positions, and do we need some in the vacant ones? Are we going to refill them, or what are we going to do with them? And so we've been able to, or the plan is to reconfigure some of the current open positions to hire an AI architect and hire a data architect. Because, back to that planning, we need somebody to be able to focus on data and on AI. And all of us, and whether it's our business users or us, right? We all have our own jobs, and it's like this AI thing's all come upon us, and it really requires additional resources, but we're also doing our own jobs, our full-time jobs at the same time. So we're going to see if we can carve out a few additional resources to help with AI going forward and the architecture.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, and Jody, let me bring you into this conversation too. So earlier, I love the fact that you mentioned labeling the data, right? Because we're finding that too as we do AI work. It's more emphasis on that. So do you have any thoughts on how to go about that? It's probably under data governance somehow, right? So any thoughts on that?
Well, I think our institutional effectiveness and IT team is going to be a big part in that. I just think that we need to do a lot of work. And similar to what Scott said, we have an IT team that, not unlike a lot of institutions, has turned over recently to a good extent. And so it might be that we have somebody that's on staff that has a great deal of AI knowledge, a couple people actually, and interest in it. So, I think using those resources that have the passion for it, but also understand the data and have lived with the data, they can really help in that regard.
Yeah, and since you're in the career field, right? Great career for somebody, right?
Right.
So,
yeah, maybe we'll use a new grad for that.
yeah, right. Okay, all right. Well, great discussion on that. Thanks, Scott, for sharing all that. And we will move on to the next section. And Steve, I'm going to turn it back over to you to talk about some use cases.
And again, thanks, Scott. Thanks, Jody. Great examples, real life examples from people working in the field at higher ed institutions. So what I want to go over briefly here, if you go to the next slide here, is what are we seeing as a company, right? Because we do analytics. We had the capacity to do AI. The question is, what is of most value to our customers and where are they at, right? We always want to provide services meeting our customers where they're at. And so what we're finding, this guy I think kind of dovetails or overlaps with what you guys both talked about, is kind of three buckets of work that we're involved in. The first is around proof of concept projects. And Scott, this is kind of what you were talking about here, where you kind of dip your toe in the water to prove the value of AI, as well as gain, which I imagine, Scott, you got out of that, you got some institutional support around it, but also, and is, it's incumbent upon you guys as leaders at your schools to understand this technology, right? So you gain more practical understanding of it. So we've been engaged with a few of our customers on doing these proof of concepts, kind of short. If you look at the bottom one, kind of the short, smart starter solutions as well, kind of small, low hanging fruit, high value, low risk type of projects that they can embark on to, again, get that institutional buy-in, learn about this technology, and prove the value. Find that use case that's most valuable to you. In the middle there is really around education sessions, right? We're finding there's this great need just to understand what is AI. What's the difference between machine learning and large language models, right? What are the limitations? What should I be worried about? Can I use an off-the-shelf open AI chat GPT? Is that okay? What risk do I run into, right? So we've been engaged with a lot of different institutions, just doing basic understanding of what's available there and just some practical ideas around how to use it and get started, but do it safely. So the next couple slides will just give you some ideas what we've done here. Here's a screenshot. We have an existing student at risk, student retention solution where we identify risk factors for students to help schools focus on the students who are most at risk for not coming back the next semester. Retention is a big deal at higher ed, obviously. One of the things we added is using machine learning. We added a likelihood score of students coming back, the probability. We added it to the existing dashboard. So they have that as another data element to, if they're an advisor, let's say, to really understand, which students are most at risk and triage their efforts. All offices are short-staffed. They can't talk to all students. They don't need to. So using, their past data, building a machine learning model and adding it to a solution here is a value add. I will say one of the things here is we always try to balance is giving more information, but giving it in a way that's digestible and they trust. We find a big deal for end users is trust of what they're seeing. A lot of times advisors or student success folks just don't want to take a number and act on it. They want to understand where is that coming from, right? Because, it's a big deal when they reach out to a student. They don't want to miss anyone, right? So that's one thing that we're finding as we roll out these solutions. The next solution here is around using generative AI. So this is really using those large language models, which are the underpinning of your chat GPT and those type of tools here. And we're finding that there's a big need for schools to become more efficient in managing their data. One way of doing it is using that technology to do document search. So a lot of schools will have documents spread all apart their institution in SharePoint and just file stores, PDFs. And anytime they need to pull together that, they got to manually search for it, right? Using this technology and Scott, to what you were saying, getting your data organized, you're able to use generative AI technology to make it easy. So they could type in a search bar, what's my PTO policy? And it pulls up the relevant policy with a little more narrative around it. Also, they could use that in the front end for prospective students who are interested in knowing, do I need to take the GMAT for a certain graduate program, right? And so and it pulls up a narrative and a link to the appropriate documentation. So we're finding that this is something too that a lot of schools are interested in, and it provides high value, right? High efficiency or increase their efficiency around that. All right, next.
I think we want to continue talking about some additional use cases, bring Jody and Scott into discussion around this document search. I know one thing we talked to somebody in IR was this whole process around accreditation, right? That seems to be a very laborious, they have to gather not only data, but documents, like I heard, looking at minutes, and you got to search through minutes. And so that might be a potential application. Again, the idea of starting with document Gen AI is that you don't necessarily have to have it all sorted and organized, right? You kind of, I would say you got to organize it maybe a little bit to make the search easy, but it's documents, right, versus structured data. So I think that makes it easier to start with. So Scott and Jody, I don't know if you have any ideas around those kinds of use cases or other use cases you've been thinking about.
Well, I can just share that this whole chatbot concept that's unique to, our institution is one of the things many have expressed an interest in, just because, we spend a lot of time both with prospective students answering questions as well as current students, whether it be registrar questions. We have an experiential learning program that is a little complicated to understand and can be have unique factors depending on what the student has already done. And so, to use these chat bots would be huge for us from a time saving standpoint. We also have individuals who are really interested in looking at, okay, I have a timeline, I have a project, how can I simplify kind of project planning by using artificial intelligence? And I don't know that we even know what that looks like yet, but it's definitely something that we've talked about. So, and then of course that retention report, that was great to see, Steve, just because we're always thinking about retention. It's such a risk for our institution, being a small institution, to lose students. And so, we almost have too much data right now, and we need a kind of more consolidated solution, because to your very point, Steve, I think student affairs folks, they're trained to help people. And so they don't want to turn anybody away. So they need the right tools to be able to assess, who they should be spending their time with. I just don't think we have that yet. I think we have too many sources of information, and it's hard to make sense of it all.
Hey, Jody, one thing as you're talking through, I remember from previous conversations, you mentioned one use case that you had for preparing students for interviews, right? Using like ChatGPT. I don't know if you want to just talk about that. I thought that was an interesting use case.
Yeah, and it's super simple, right? So we, just going into ChatGPT, the free version, and I was approached by a student going into a career that I don't know much about. They wanted to do a mock interview, and I just asked, what are typical interview questions for this type of position, and received, a good amount of interview questions that seemed very legitimate, and went through that mock interview and was told after the fact that, one of the questions was actually asked during the interview, and other questions were similar to kind of what we went through. So a very useful, 30-second hitting ChatGPT up for something I would have had to research for, a decent amount of time had it not been for ChatGPT.
Great. Hey, Scott, I know we didn't get into the use cases you guys looked at, but do you want to talk about some of those for your POC?
Sure. Well, use cases that we did with the POC is we had our marketing folks, they look at leads coming in. So we want to look at trends around that. And so that was something that they looked at, that they found could be very useful. It was very useful for the marketing AVP and their manager to determine how those leads are, because they could see how the campaigns are doing. So there's an immediate, there's always immediate feedback, but this way we're able to track it and trend it, and the pulse or the AI could then tell us, the trend's going this way, trend's going that way. And with the other metadata that they were capturing, they could determine, based upon cookies, if it was related to this marketing campaign or that marketing campaign. And that was much more successful than what they've done before, because what marketing had wanted to do, but back to not having enough resources, they didn't have the resources to build dashboards yet. They wanted to build those dashboards, but they didn't. But with the tool, they're able to build these metrics out in like an hour and a half, couple hours. And so it satisfied them right away. And certainly they're a user of our pulse right now since we've moved it into production.
Great. Were there any others you explored?
We're exploring adding application data to it, back to the, the funnel for students, of seeing how, the leads turn into applications, turns into enrollments, etc. We're talking to HR has started with it. I'm not quite sure what their use case is. I don't recall off the top of my head, but they're looking at that as well. Another, and I'm just going to say a little bit off of the POC, but back to the smart search, an example that's come up for us. And I don't quite remember all the proper terminology, but let's just call it sustainability. There's a department on campus that wants to look at sustainability across the university and where we've had initiatives. And when I say we, all the individual departments. And so there's hundreds or thousands of web pages that may have mentioned it. We've wanted to, and I think we have used AI to crawl all of our websites to determine if there's sustainability initiatives listed there. That way we can feed that back to that sustainability office. Then they can go out to those organizations and get more information, because that certainly gets us farther down the road, rather than that person saying, well, let's have a meeting and gather all this information manually. So I think that was another use to go to smart search that could be useful for large institutions. And I don't know what's on everybody's website. I mean, it's governed to some degree, and it's governed, but you're not really, you don't know exactly what's being said on every one about every initiative.
Great. Those are great use cases. All right. So let's go to the closing, and what we're going to end with, and the headline for this was to walk away with some practical tips for getting started. So what we want to leave you with is 5 steps to getting started. So if you can do these 5 steps, you're on your way to getting started with AI, right? So number 1, as we've been saying throughout this webinar, and we say it a lot as we're talking to customers, centralize your data. I think AI really accelerates that need, right? To eliminate those silos, centralize your data, have your data labeled, as Jody said, right? So have a way to do that into a platform. 2, think about use cases. We just had a great discussion about potential use cases, right? So high value, low risk, right? I think that's the key, is to prove the value and learn as you do these use cases, right? And track the progress, track the results, and then lessons learned, just like we've been talking about today. And then I think great point about just being transparent throughout the institution so that everybody understands both the benefits and risks of AI. Back to quality, right? Back to understanding, and this gets to trusting not only data, but AI, right? Better data, I think, leads to more trust with AI. So that's becoming even more important. And then number 4, we've been mentioning governance, right? So I think the key point here is that look at your existing governance structures. Don't think about AI as a net new thing you now have to handle on top of everything else. I think we can leverage existing governance structures and add the AI component to it first. And as Scott and Jody said earlier, right, look at your existing policies and see what you can just continue to use and maybe even make even more important, and keep implementing those. So I think that's the way to get started with governance. And then finally, education. And I think this is probably, maybe this should have been number 1, but I think it's always there, right? Start with education, keep doing education, and then end with education, right? So I think because AI is new to everybody, we know there's a lot of fear about AI, lot of risks with it because it's so new. I think the sooner you can start the education, the better. And then you give a chance to then have folks give you feedback on what they're thinking, what their fears are, how to make it work for them. So I think that education process is really key to the whole thing. Finally, I want to just end with how we're enabling AI at Data Intelligent. So what we have is a platform to unify your data and provide those solutions. So again, in this platform is a platform to unify those multiple sources, eliminate those silos. And then once you have the data in one centralized location, then you can feed those analytic solutions as well as AI solutions to enable those analytics, the decision making, adopting AI, I think faster by doing this. So so platform does that. And this is kind of a visual, right? We have two parts to it. We have the data solutions on the left into a centralized data lake, and then the analytic solutions on the right. And that includes AI solutions as well. So just wanted to let you know how we're enabling AI in our platform. All right, just want to close with a thank you to both Scott and Jody for sharing their thoughts. I think it's been a great discussion. I know I learned a lot by the discussion, so thank you, Scott and Jody, for your time today. And you can see all of our contact information. Happy to continue the discussion with you, and let us know how we can help you on your journey to use AI. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.